I'm in a running group that meets at Dunkin' Donuts every week, so I'm going to make them little beanies for Christmas that are similar to the one that some of you have gotten at the New York City Marathon. These are the supplies you'll need to make 2 beanies. A courtyard pink, got beetroot purple at Joann's. Courtyard orange, I bought sky orange peel at Joann's. Thread, and we're going to make a pattern like this. What I'm going to do first is just make a pattern. Because there's a seam allowance, I'm going to lay this on just a little bit above, about a 1/4 inch of where the seam of this hat is. And I'm just going to put it up here and trace around it. It's actually one spot that does not have a seam. That's the fold, and there's going to be a fold on our pattern when we're done. Okay, so we've drawn our pattern by tracing the original hat. So we drew it on a 11 by 8.5 inch piece of paper. So it's going to be 11 inches wide on the bottom. There's going to be a fold. You'll see that in a minute. It's a dome shape, and it's 5 1/4 inches tall. So what we're going to do first is we've got our 2 fabrics, and again, this is Joann's in the United States. This is their orange peel color fleece, and this is their beetroot colored fleece. So with this, it stretches side to side, and it's pretty wide. So I folded it to save on the fabric, and we're going to put this fold onto the fold here. And you can either, I think I've got that all. Yep. So your finished piece here is going to end up being 22 inches wide fabric, and this is going to be 5 1/2 inches tall and 22 inches wide. And we're just going to put right sides together like this. We'll put some pins in, and then we're going to take them to the sewing machine and sew them. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning just to keep it nice and staying together. So again, now your hat looks like this. So it's got a brim and it's got a top. It's got that part in the middle. You're going to fold it in half, and we'll pin it in a second. But basically now you're going to sew from the edges here where the brim was attached to the hat all the way around the crown, and then all the way to where the fold is. Sew it together. Some people may want to sew with a zigzag stitch because this is a stretch fabric. I tried it both ways. I think these hats are big enough that they don't necessarily need it. You may just need to go slow as you're going through all that bulk. You can definitely tell where the fold is. I'm just going to go ahead, it's my own preference to sew a little bit beyond where that fold is. And again, back stitch just to keep everything nice and from coming apart. So now again, you've got your basic structure of your hat. We'll turn it right side out for a minute just to see what it looks like at this point. But what it's missing is in the original, there's almost like a dart here to give it a little bit of structure. So we're going to do that next. When I measured it, that dart or crease in a sense was 2 inches. So what we're going to do is find the middle of the hat, which is, you can just fold it in half if you want to see where the middle is. About there. Just put like a little pin there to mark it. Now we're just going to fold it kind of like in itself this way. And we're going in here, and we're just going to measure 2 inches. So we can just take a ruler. I'm just going to mark it with a piece of chalk. It's 2 inches that way. 2 inches this way. So now we're basically just going to sew a straight line from the first mark that we made to the second. Just get these threads out of the way. And again, back stitch to keep it together. Move out that pin so you don't, we'll just go sew all the way to the other side. And again, just back stitch a couple stitches to keep everything in place. And we'll trim that off. So now your hat has that bit of structure on the top of the head. So the way this hat was made was this brim was folded back into itself and just covering the seam that you sewed on where the brim attached to the top of the hat. So we're just going to fold that up and then pin it in place, making sure that this brim is covering up the seams that you had on the inside of the hat. And we're going to use a pin to put it in place. If you want to do, you could take a ruler and just like measure. So you can see here, this is about 2 1/4 inches. So we'll put these pins in, and then when we're done, like I said, before we start to sew, we'll just look inside to make sure that these are actually going to catch on the seam. Because really what you want it to do is you want to, as you're top stitching or decorative stitching on this seam right here, you want to make sure that you're actually capturing or catching the edge that you folded under, or else it would just droop out, which you would not want. Let's put this hat now into our sewing machine again. I like to just start where the seam is. You can start wherever you want, actually. Now on this original, you can see where they've got this decorative stitching that's kind of overlocking each other. My machine has a stitch similar to that, so that's what I'm going to use. If you don't have that on your machine, you could just use a zigzag stitch. I found on my machine, I have to do this fairly slow, or it might skip a stitch. I'm trying to keep the middle of the stitching along where the two colors come together. So now we're back where we started. I always like to do a couple of just straight stitches, again back and forth, just to lock all that stitching in. We'll trim off these excess threads, both on the inside and outside. So now you have the structure of this cap done. So now it looks like this, but obviously it's missing the tassel. So we'll do that next. And just to show you the inside, again, you're catching the top of where you had folded that. So next thing we're going to do is cut these tassels. So what we're going to do is cut from each color of the fabric 6 1/2 inches long and 1 7/8 inches tall. And what we're going to do then is each one of these tassels is basically 3/8 of an inch. What you can do too, if you want, is just like this and just transfer that mark to your other one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold this fabric in half and just take a regular type of scissors and we're going to cut, but we're not going to cut all the way through. We're basically, in a sense, just cutting fringe. Guess it's not going all the way through. When it's done, it looks almost like a little spider of sorts. Oops, good enough. Then we're going to do the same thing with the pink fabric, and again, you're not going to cut all the way through. You're going to cut close. This fleece doesn't really fray, so it's fine to have it like that. So I said we didn't cut all the way through, which we didn't, but actually with one of these we're going to cut all the way. We're going to cut one of them off. So we'll cut off that little orange guy. I found out was when I looked at the way this had been constructed, it looks like they basically just sewed one of the orange ones onto the top of the hat as the tie that was going to tie all the other ones on. So we're just going to put this hat through the machine. Again, I have what's called a free arm machine. If you don't have this, you may have to do this step by hand so you don't sew the hat closed. So we're going to go right where there's that cross of where we seamed our hat and put in a little dart in a sense. And we're going to put this right in the middle, so just kind of crease it or do something to know where the middle is. Get it in there. Now you're going to sew through all these layers, and you're just sewing a straight stitch. It's really just to keep it in place so that as you wear the hat and you launder the hat, it doesn't fall apart. So we're going to take that out, cut off the threads, cut the threads off on the inside as well, obviously. So now you've got your hat that looks like this with these two ties. So the next part, the only part left, is to really take these and just kind of bunch them up, put them in between there, get them right in the center, and then tie that one tie that you anchored on with actual stitching. And when I looked at the hat from the race, it looked like they had basically double knotted it. So if basically you end up with a hat that looks like this, it's not the same as being there at race day, but pretty close. And I think your friends will like it. So I hope you have fun making it. Lastly, since you have enough fabric to make two, you can make one, but then try it out. I made a second one for my husband. He actually has a little bit bigger head, so we actually made it just a slight bit bigger. We used an 11.5-inch band instead of a 11.